Hi there, my name's Arya. I thought planning my wedding would be the happiest time of my life. Instead, my parents sent me an envelope. No hug, no call, just 4 words. Deal with it. You chose this life. They didn't just miss my wedding. They posted about family values. At a BBQ I wasn't invited to. They opened credit cards under my name. And when I fought back, they called me crazy behind my back. Was it the wedding that broke us? Or had they been cutting me out long before I ever said I do? I had spent months planning my wedding, not some extravagant affair with golden chandeliers and a 500-person guest list, but a simple, heartfelt ceremony at a cozy vineyard just outside Austin, Texas. Daniel and I had scraped together every dollar ourselves. No loans, no family handouts. Just two people building a life together from scratch. Still, somewhere deep down, I had clung to a fragile hope. Maybe my family would surprise me. Maybe they'd show up with smiles and hugs, proud that I had made it, that I had found someone good. I knew better, of course, but knowing and hoping aren't always the same thing. 6 months before the wedding, my parents Darlene and Wendell started dropping hints thicker than Texas humidity in July. Flying out is so expensive, Mom sighed one evening over the phone. And your father's got nothing decent to wear for something fancy like that. Dad chimed in, yeah, suits ain't cheap, gas prices too. At first, I thought they were just venting. Families complain, it's what they do. But the comments kept coming, passive-aggressive little jabs left and right, until the message was clear as day. If you want us there, you better make it worth our while. I tried to be gracious. I offered to help them find affordable options, suggested ride-sharing with other family members, even offered to book a modest motel nearby for them at my own expense. It was met with tight-lipped silence. Until one afternoon, my mom finally snapped. If you really cared about family, you wouldn't expect us to shell out for all this. You'd help us out. You're the one getting married. That was the moment the air shifted. It wasn't about celebrating my happiness. It was about leverage, about guilt, about making me responsible for their effort to show up. I remember sitting in the kitchen, holding the phone, staring at the blank wall like it could offer me answers. I realized then, love, in their eyes, always had a price tag. I politely refused. I told them the wedding was small, intimate, and we simply couldn't afford to bankroll everyone's trip. I said it firmly but kindly, hoping they'd understand. They didn't. The calls stopped. The texts dried up. No can't wait to see you, no congrats honey, just radio silence. A few weeks later, Daniel and I mailed out the invitations, handwritten, heartfelt, sealed with trembling hope. I spent days checking my mailbox like a teenager waiting for a college acceptance letter. Nothing came, not even a simple RSVP from my own parents. Friends noticed. Hey, Arya, is your mom coming? Someone asked at the bridal shower. I forced a smile, waved it off with a joke about family drama, but inside it gutted me. Daniel held my hand under the table. No words, just the steady warmth of someone who knew how much it hurt to pretend you weren't hurting. As the wedding date crept closer, I began to shift internally. I stopped imagining their faces in the front row. I stopped saving them a seat. In the quiet hours after work, I sat on the couch with a glass of cheap red wine, scrolling through old photos, Christmas mornings, birthdays, family road trips. Each memory now felt like a mirage, a thing I had desperately believed was real until it faded under the harsh sun of reality. One evening, as Daniel and I stuffed gift bags for our tiny guest list friends, a few co-workers, a couple of distant cousins, he looked at me and asked carefully, "Are you sure you're okay doing this without them?" I hesitated, staring at the ribbon in my hands. Part of me still wanted to believe they would show up last minute, all smiles and apologies, blaming work or traffic or a forgotten calendar. But another part, a deeper, older part of me, knew better. I looked Daniel in the eye and said, maybe they were never really there in the first place. The night before the wedding, the apartment was quieter than usual. No buzzing phone, no frantic last-minute advice from a mother who was supposed to be thrilled for her daughter. Just me, Daniel, and the echo of a family that had chosen silence over celebration. We had an early dinner, something simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, because neither of us had the appetite for anything fancy. Afterward, Daniel went to double-check the suits while I curled up on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I had lost them. Maybe when I chose a different path. Maybe when I stopped being the version of me they could control. The clock ticked past midnight. Still no messages, no missed calls, nothing. I got up, checked the front door one last time like some desperate kid waiting for Santa Claus. Nothing but the soft hum of Texas night air. I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and whispered to myself, "This is my life now." I didn't know yet, but the envelope would arrive tomorrow, sealing everything I hadn't dared to admit. Morning dragged itself in, sunlight leaking across the hardwood like a warning. I brewed coffee out of habit and sat by the window staring at the dead street. Deep down, I had always known this day would come, the day I'd have to admit my family was never the fairy tale I pretended it was. The knock came just before noon. No balloons, no hugs. Just a worn envelope shoved halfway into the doorframe, as if even the delivery deserved no ceremony. I pulled it free. My hands felt colder than they should have been under the Texas sun. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. 6 words in my mother's sharp, unmistakable handwriting. "Deal with it. You chose this life." No signature, no warmth. Just a final dismissal from people I once called home. I set the paper on the kitchen table like it might detonate. Daniel walked in from checking the car and froze at my face. "What is it?" he asked. I slid the paper over. He read it once, then again. His jaw clenched. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. No, I thought. I didn't. But it wasn't new. It had been building for years, layer upon invisible layer, until everything finally cracked. 6 years. 6 years of paying rent when Dad's unemployment ran dry. 6 years of covering Mom's endless doctor visits for a bad back that didn't stop her shopping sprees. 6 years of co-signing loans for Celeste because you're the responsible one, Arya. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a safety net nobody thanked, only leaned on. I thought back to one Christmas Eve when I hesitated to cover another month's rent. Mom, irritated, had snapped, "We raised you. The least you can do is help your family survive." Survive. As if I owed them my future because they gave me a childhood of broken promises. Not once had anyone said thank you. Not when I paid for Dad's truck repairs after another drunk crash. Not when I bailed Celeste out of another failed semester. It wasn't love. It was expectation. And the day I said no refusing to fund their appearance at my wedding, they cut me out without hesitation. I turned my coffee mug in my hands, remembering when the cracks really started to show. I had met Daniel during a company food bank event. We spent hours packing boxes, trading dry jokes about our overzealous supervisor. Daniel wasn't flashy, no degree, no designer clothes. He was steady, the kind of man who remembered my coffee order without asking. Telling my family about him was like throwing raw meat to wolves. At a tense dinner 6 months before the wedding, I introduced him. Mom gave him a look like she was spotting a stray dog. Dad muttered into his beer, "Couldn't do better, huh?" Celeste waited until we were doing dishes to whisper, "Guess you settle when you're scared to end up alone." I laughed it off, pretended it didn't gut me. But driving home, Daniel saw through it. "You know that's not normal, right?" he said gently. I stared out the window, unable to defend them anymore, because it wasn't normal, and maybe it never had been. Their pride in me was conditional. It was about control, about appearances. I was useful as long as I made them look good. And when I chose a life they couldn't dictate, I stopped being their daughter. Daniel squeezed my hand. "You don't owe them your happiness." Simple words. Dangerous words. They shook everything loose inside me. After that, we moved forward alone. We booked a small barbecue joint for catering, picked wildflowers over roses, ordered plain wedding bands, no diamonds, no show. When friends asked about the guest list, the bridal party, the speeches, I lied. "Oh, we're keeping it intimate. Just close friends." I wasn't just mourning their absence. I was mourning the illusion of who I thought they were. Maybe some families are built by blood. Others are built by the people who choose to show up. And mine had made their choice clear. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The days leading up to the wedding blurred into a strange mixture of tension and hollow excitement. After finalizing the last-minute details, Daniel and I tried to distract ourselves grocery runs, making seating charts, even binge-watching an old sitcom neither of us liked that much. Anything to drown out the silence that had settled over my phone like dust on a forgotten shelf. Every few hours, I would glance at it, almost involuntarily, like some desperate reflex. Maybe a message had come through. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe they'd realized how cruel it all looked from the outside. But the screen stayed stubbornly blank. No missed calls. No, "We're proud of you." No, "Can't wait to see you walk down the aisle." I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their validation, that I was stronger than this, but it didn't stop the small, relentless ache from chewing at the edges of my heart. One evening after dinner, Daniel and I took a walk around the block. The Texas air was thick but cooling, the cicadas humming their endless summer song. I tucked my arm into his as we strolled under the orange streetlights. "I'm sorry they're not better," Daniel said quietly. I shook my head. "You don't have to be sorry for them. They've made their choices." The truth tasted bitter but necessary. I wanted to believe it was enough. It wasn't. The next morning, while sorting through emails, my phone buzzed on the table. Not a call, a text. I grabbed it before my mind could race too far. It was from my mother. "Good luck, but you're not family anymore. You chose your side." No greeting, no explanation, just a cold verdict, as if she were slamming a door in my face without even bothering to look me in the eye. For a moment, the world tilted. I sat there, blinking at the screen, reading it over and over as if repetition would make the words change. They didn't. Daniel came in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He froze when he saw my face. Without a word, I handed him the phone. He read it, once, twice, his jaw tightening with every pass. Then he set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. I didn't cry. I thought I might. I thought maybe the dam would break at last. But all I felt was a kind of numbness, a hollow echo where love should have been. They had drawn their line in the sand. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was, what? A stranger? A disappointment? An enemy? I sat there for a long time, letting the stillness fill the room, feeling it seep into my bones. Daniel didn't rush me. He just stayed there, a steady presence in a world that suddenly felt unfamiliar and sharp-edged. 2 days later, just when I thought maybe the worst was behind me, I logged onto Facebook to check the final RSVPs from friends. At the top of my feed was a photo posted by my father. A family dinner, my parents, Celeste, Margot, Vince, gathered around a table piled high with food, laughing like some Hallmark card version of themselves. No seat empty, no one missing, no room left for me. The caption burned like acid in my throat. "Real family doesn't betray you for strangers." The likes and comments piled up fast. "Love you guys! Family first, always! So proud to know you stand for what matters." Not one comment questioning where I was. Not one person asking why the bride-to-be wasn't at her own family's gathering. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. Daniel found me there, still frozen, hours later. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't have to. He just turned off the monitor and pulled me up from the chair, guiding me gently to the couch like I was made of something fragile. We sat there in silence. No explanations, no fake smiles, no pretending. Just truth heavy, ugly, and unbreakable. That night, lying awake with the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles above me, I replayed it all in my mind. Every time I'd paid their bills, every time I'd swallowed their insults, every time I'd begged, silently or out loud, for just a scrap of affection. And for what? A text that cut me loose like dead weight, a Facebook post that erased me from the family history. I turned onto my side, facing Daniel's sleeping form. His breathing was slow and steady, a calm rhythm against the chaos roaring in my head. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't cry myself to sleep over them. I didn't make excuses. I didn't wonder what I could have done differently. Instead, I whispered into the dark, "I'm not going to beg anymore." And for the first time, I meant it. I thought losing them would destroy me. Instead, it freed me. Morning sunlight poured through the thin curtains, pooling onto the hardwood floors like liquid gold. I blinked awake, momentarily forgetting what day it was, letting a fragile, impossible hope crack open inside my chest. Maybe today would be different. Maybe someone would show up. Maybe they'd realize what they were about to lose. The apartment was eerily quiet. Daniel had already gotten up, probably making coffee like he always did when he sensed I needed a few more minutes to gather myself. I sat up slowly, swinging my feet onto the cold floor, staring blankly at the small makeshift bouquet of wildflowers Daniel had picked up for me yesterday. A whisper of a smile ghosted over my lips. Even when the world felt indifferent, Daniel found ways to anchor me. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. For a second, my heart lifted an involuntary, ridiculous leap of hope. I hurried to the door, smoothing down my hair, half expecting— what? Mom standing there with teary eyes? Dad with some clumsy, gruff apology? Instead, it was just a courier. No uniform, no smile, just a man holding a small, battered envelope. No return address, no bright wrapping, just beige paper and the feeling of finality. I signed without thinking, the pen feeling heavy in my hand, and closed the door. Daniel appeared behind me, his expression cautious. "What is it?" "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We sat at the kitchen table, side by side, as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, hastily torn from a notebook. 6 words scratched out in a hurried, almost angry scrawl. "Deal with it. You chose this life. That was it. No love, no well wishes, no regrets, just a final, decisive blow." I stared at it for a long time, the words swimming before my eyes. Somewhere deep in my chest, something cracked, not a violent shatter, but a slow, inevitable break, like ice splitting across a frozen lake, quiet but irreversible. Daniel reached out and placed his hand over mine, squeezing gently. I didn't cry. There were no tears left to give them, only a hollow, aching clarity. I folded the paper back into the envelope and set it down carefully, as if it were something toxic. That was when I noticed my phone buzzing. At first I hoped, foolishly, that maybe it was someone reaching out to offer support. Instead, it was a string of messages from a few mutual friends. Cold, formal, awkwardly polite. "Sorry, Arya, can't make it today. Hope it's beautiful, though. We're tied up with family stuff, but sending good vibes." Every message a new splinter, driving deeper into already raw skin. Confused, I checked my social media, digging through the trail they'd left behind like breadcrumbs. It didn't take long to find it. A private message chain screenshots forwarded from a mutual friend who hadn't bought into the Whisper campaign. Margot, my own aunt, had been quietly messaging people behind my back for weeks. "Arya's making reckless choices. Not sure we should be supporting this. It's better to stay neutral and let her figure it out on her own." Neutral. As if watching someone bleed out alone at their own wedding was a respectable choice. I sat there, stunned, the betrayal washing over me in slow, nauseating waves. It wasn't just absence. It was sabotage. Daniel crouched beside my chair, grounding me again with his steady presence. "You didn't lose family today," he said quietly. "You lost people who never deserved to call themselves that." The words stung sharp and undeniable, but there was a stitching happening too, somewhere deep inside. Tiny, invisible threads weaving a new kind of strength through the places I'd been left torn open. I pressed my forehead to his shoulder, breathing in the clean, familiar scent of his soap, coffee, and the barest trace of the aftershave he wore for special occasions. "Today is still ours," he whispered. "No one gets to steal that from you." I nodded slowly, letting his certainty seep into my bones. Later that afternoon, as I stood before the mirror in my simple lace dress, I saw it clearly for the first time. Not the girl desperate for approval, not the daughter pleading to be seen, but the woman who had finally chosen herself. I placed my hand gently over my heart and said, aloud to my reflection, "Today is not about what I lost. It's about what I refused to lose myself." There was no music swelling in the background, no cinematic transformation, just me, breathing steadily, staring down the ghost of every apology I'd ever owed them. The door creaked open, and Daniel peeked inside, his smile small but steady. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded once, firm. I would walk down that aisle carrying nothing from them but the weight they taught me to shed. The sun was already climbing high over Austin when I stood by the window, my bouquet clutched loosely in one hand, feeling strangely weightless. The morning had unfurled quietly, almost too quietly. Part of me wanted to believe the worst was over, that today, of all days, would be untouched. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Celeste. Can't wait to celebrate you today. For a moment, one heartbreaking, foolish moment, I allowed myself to believe it. To believe that maybe, just maybe, my sister meant it. That despite everything, she would show up not to sabotage, but to stand by me. I tucked the phone away carefully and smiled at Daniel, who was tightening his tie in the mirror. Looks like Celeste might come after all, I said, trying to sound casual. Daniel met my eyes in the reflection. His smile was small, cautious. We'll see, he said simply. We headed to the venue, a small sunlit garden tucked behind a historic inn downtown. Wildflowers lined the simple aisle, their bright faces tilted toward the sky. It wasn't the grand wedding I'd once daydreamed about, but it was honest. It was ours. Guests started arriving, familiar faces from work, from college. Some hugged me tightly, whispering congratulations. Some avoided eye contact altogether, their smiles brittle. I chalked it up to nerves, to their awkwardness over my family's absence. Until one of my coworkers, Jess, pulled me aside near the makeshift bar. "Hey," she said, looking uncomfortable. "You might want to see this." She handed me her phone. On the screen played a TikTok, already racking up hundreds of likes. There was Celeste, pouting dramatically into the camera, swiping fake tears from her cheeks. Text scrawled across the top. Sometimes desperate people call it love. Laughter flooded the comments section. I froze, the glass of water trembling slightly in my hand. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the audacity, to pretend to support me to my face while stabbing me publicly in the back, to mock the happiest day of my life like it was some cheap joke. I felt Daniel at my side before I even registered moving. He glanced at Jess' phone, his jaw tightening. "You don't have to deal with this today," he said, voice low. But I knew better. I had to deal with it because ignoring it was how they'd won for so long. The ceremony started moments later. I tucked the phone away, pressing the rising anger deep into my gut, burying it beneath my vows, my trembling hands, my determined smile. As I stood across from Daniel, our hands linked together, the officiant reading words I barely heard, I felt the betrayal like a bruise spreading across my chest. But when Daniel looked at me, really looked at me, all I saw was someone who chose me, freely and fiercely. We exchanged vows in the warm Texas sun, wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and for a few minutes the noise faded away. Until the reception. I barely had time to savor our first dance before the second knife twisted. Whispers slithered through the crowd, sly and poisonous. "Did you hear? Apparently she had to rush the wedding. I heard she's already pregnant." One guest, someone I'd only met through a friend of a friend, even came up, clinking their glass awkwardly. "Congratulations! When's the baby due?" My breath caught, my smile freezing on my face. I glanced at Daniel, who caught on immediately, his arm wrapped protectively around my waist, pulling me closer. "They're disgusting," he muttered under his breath. It didn't take a genius to figure out where the rumor had started. Celeste, again, doing what she did best, poisoning the well. This time, though, I wasn't crumbling. I caught Daniel's eye and gave the smallest shake of my head. Not here. Not now. Instead, I clutched his hand tighter and lifted my chin. When it came time for the toasts, Daniel took the mic briefly. He didn't mention the absent family. Didn't talk about regrets or what could have been. He simply said, "Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into." Applause rose up around us, genuine and fierce. I blinked fast, feeling the tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but not from sadness this time. After the formalities ended, and the cake was cut, and the last guest stumbled laughing toward an Uber, Daniel and I retreated back to our apartment. Still in my dress, still barefoot, I sat on the floor of our living room, scrolling through my phone. The TikTok was still climbing in views. The comments were still cruel. But now I saw it clearly. This wasn't about me. It was about their need to punish me for leaving the cage they'd built. and I wasn't going to let them control the narrative anymore. I started gathering evidence, screenshots of Celeste's TikTok, messages from guests whispering the pregnancy rumor, photos of the family BBQ being posted the same day as my wedding, all of them laughing, raising beers, as if they'd dodged a bullet by skipping my happiness. I created a folder on my desktop, labeling it quietly, Truth. I wasn't planning on rage posting, no dramatic confrontations, no screaming matches. I was going to be smart. I was going to be strategic. And I was going to make sure they never forgot the day they chose to lose me. Morning light spilled through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the small apartment floor. I was still in my pajamas, a cup of lukewarm coffee abandoned on the table, the truth folder open in front of me. There was something mechanical about my movements now, printing screenshots, saving links, organizing names and timestamps. Daniel padded over from the kitchen, refilling my coffee without a word. His quiet support anchored me, even when my hands trembled slightly. The notification pinged on my phone almost sounded casual. Ping! I ignored it at first. Ping! Another. Finally, sighing, I swiped it open. It was a message from my friend Rachel, one of the few who had stood by me without wavering. You need to see this. Attached was a Facebook post. My fingers tightened around the phone as I opened it. Photos filled the screen. My family gathered in Margot's backyard. Balloons, grinning faces, red Solo cups raised high, tables stacked with barbecue ribs and potato salad. The caption read, Celebrating real family and true values today. Some ties are better cut loose. The timestamp said it all. The same day, the same hour I had been standing in a white dress, vowing myself to a new beginning. Pain twisted inside me, sharp and brutal. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They had celebrated my absence. I stared at the images until they blurred, rage and heartbreak warring for space in my chest. Daniel came up behind me, reading over my shoulder. His hand tightened briefly on my shoulder, his silence louder than any words. I dropped the phone onto the couch, the sound jarring in the stillness. I guess they didn't want to miss out on their kind of party, I said, voice flat. Daniel shook his head, jaw set tight. They're not family, not anymore. I thought that was the worst of it. I really did. Until Rachel messaged again. There's a video too. Reluctantly, I clicked the link. The footage was shaky, someone's phone recording laughter and clinking glasses. Then the camera panned to a makeshift altar, an old wooden crate covered in white fabric, set up in the middle of the yard. Margot stood beside it, holding a cheap plastic bowl filled with water. She raised it high and announced loudly, Today we cleanse ourselves of betrayal. We wash away disloyalty. Everyone whooped and cheered as she dipped her hand dramatically into the bowl, flicking water around like a bad imitation of a priest. The caption underneath? You can't cleanse the ungrateful, but at least we tried. I didn't realize I was shaking until Daniel gently took the phone from my hand. He stared at it for a long moment, then without a word, placed it face down on the table with a thud. They don't deserve to have any piece of you left, he said finally, his voice low and hard. Something cold settled inside me, not sadness, not even rage anymore, just a clarity sharp enough to cut through bone. I stood slowly, walking over to the Truth folder. Opening a new subfolder titled BBQ Mockery, I began saving screenshots of the video, the comments, the laughter. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this to save myself from ever doubting again. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal. I would document it all, not to weaponize, but to remember, so that no apology wrapped in crocodile tears would ever sway me again. The corkboard wed hung up for wedding seating charts quickly transformed into something else entirely. Pins connected screenshots to text messages. Photos overlapped like scars across its surface. Financial abuse, public humiliation, psychological manipulation. Daniel helped without asking questions, pinning up images silently beside me. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. That night, while Daniel slept, I sat at the kitchen table with a worn notebook and a cheap ballpoint pen. I wrote, I owe them nothing. I owe myself everything. The words bled into the page, permanent and unflinching. I closed the notebook carefully, setting it beside the growing mountain of evidence. Looking around our small apartment, the thrift store couch, the secondhand dishes, the wedding photos we hadn't even framed yet, I realized something powerful. They had thought they were burying me under shame. All they'd done was plant a seed, and whatever grew next would be something they could neither control nor crush. I wasn't their broken little girl anymore. I was the wildfire they never saw coming. The next morning, the sun barely breached the windows, when Daniel found me hunched over the laptop, brows knitted tight, scrolling through my credit report. I hadn't planned to check it. Honestly, I'd been avoiding anything that might add another crack to my already fractured heart. But something gnawed at me, now an instinct honed from too many years of ignoring the obvious. The first red flag hit me like a slap. A credit card account I didn't recognize, opened 6 months ago. Then another, and another. 4 cards, all maxed out. Thousands of dollars in debt under my name. My chest tightened as I clicked through the details. Electronics, furniture, spa treatments, transactions I had never authorized, never even dreamed of affording when Daniel and I were scraping by to plan a backyard wedding. There it was. My betrayal, no longer just emotional but financial, tangible, legal. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles cracked. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had robbed me. Daniel sat down beside me, reading over my shoulder. His jaw ticked once tight, controlled fury. They didn't just cross a line, he said lowly. They buried it. Before I could even begin to process the fraud, my email chimed. I glanced at the sender. Darlene Evans, my mother. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Dear Arya, we know things got a little heated lately. Families fight, that's normal. Maybe you could help us out with some overdue bills, you know. Start fresh? Let's not hold on to grudges. After all, we're family. Love, Mom. No apology for the years of neglect. No acknowledgement of the mockery. No mention of the theft. Just another ask. Another grab. Another hand reaching into my chest cavity, prying for anything still warm. I slammed the laptop closed with a force that rattled the dishes in the sink. Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I paced the tiny living room, words jamming in my throat, hands fisting at my sides. How many times had I fallen for it? How many times had I mistaken their need for love? They didn't want me. They wanted what I could give. And when I stopped giving, they started taking. The day's offenses weren't finished. Rachel texted me around noon. You need to see this. It's bad. Another link. Another betrayal. Screenshots this time, messages between Celeste and a mutual acquaintance. My sister me blood had offered someone money to spread rumors that I was mentally unstable, that my wedding meltdown wasn't about betrayal, but about my history of emotional issues, that I wasn't a wronged daughter, I was a ticking bomb. It was vicious, calculated, designed to isolate me further, to cut me off from any remaining sympathy. Daniel read over my shoulder, his face like granite. We don't let this slide, he said flatly. Not anymore. And I agreed. I wasn't going to fight this war emotionally. I was going to fight it smart. We spent the afternoon building the case. Daniel called a lawyer he knew through work, getting advice on identity theft and credit fraud. I contacted the credit bureaus, placed fraud alerts on my reports, started disputes on every unauthorized account. I filed a police report. Every screen capture, every message, every Facebook post went into carefully dated folders. This wasn't just about feeling betrayed anymore. This was about consequences. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their emotional punching bag. I was a grown woman whose patience had finally, irrevocably expired. As dusk fell, I sat back and surveyed the corkboard now covered in evidence. It was grotesque in a way, a museum of every scar they had left on me. But it wasn't me on display anymore. It was them. Daniel brought me a cup of tea, setting it silently beside me. He didn't try to pull me out of the moment. He simply stood there, solid, real, everything they had never been. I picked up my worn notebook again, flipping to a fresh page. I wrote, They thought love made me weak. It made me resilient. The pen scratched against the paper like a whisper of vengeance. No, I wasn't planning to destroy them publicly. That would be too easy and too close to the ugliness they had already embraced. I was going to do something far more terrifying. I was going to live better without them, and I was going to make sure every trace of their cruelty was exposed not through screaming matches or family feuds on Facebook, but legally, quietly, permanently. No more pleading, no more forgiving the unforgivable. That night, before bed, I stood by the window and stared out into the Texas night. No stars, no moon, just the humming electric buzz of a world that kept spinning, indifferent to betrayal. And for the first time, it didn't make me feel small. It made me feel infinite. It was time for the truth to be louder than their lies. Morning broke through the curtains in dull streaks of gray. I sat cross-legged on the couch, the folder of evidence spread open before me, my fingers idly tracing the edge of a printed screenshot. The apartment was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock. Daniel poured coffee into my favorite chipped mug and set it beside me without a word. The question hovered in the air between us, unspoken but deafening. Was I going to stay silent again? Or was I finally going to choose myself? Daniel settled across from me, elbows on his knees, voice calm but sure. They counted on you staying quiet, Arya. That's how they win. That's how they always win. I wrapped my hands around the mug, feeling the heat seep into my palms. My heart thudded slow and steady, a metronome of something ancient and rising. This time, I wouldn't let them rewrite the ending. I opened my laptop, clicked New Post, and for the first time in my life, I told the whole truth. I uploaded it all, screenshots of the unauthorized credit cards, emails from Darlene asking for money under the guise of fake apologies, Celeste's TikTok video mocking my wedding day, photos from the barbecue party, my family smiling without me, performing their cleansing ceremony, text messages disowning me, captioned in plain, unflinching words, "This is what family first looked like for me." No anger, no vengeance. Just truth, laid bare for anyone willing to see. I hit post. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The ripple effect started small. A few likes, a few comments. "I'm so sorry you went through this. You deserve better. Family isn't blood, it's loyalty." Then the shares began, and the anger, and the disbelief. Within hours, the post had gone viral. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, friends I hadn't heard from in years, strangers offering solidarity, even local news reporters sliding into my DMs, asking if I was willing to share my story publicly. For once, the shame wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. Margot and Vince were the first to feel the sting. Someone from their corporate HR flagged the post. By noon, a formal investigation had been launched into misuse of company resources. Margot had used her company email to coordinate some of the BBQ smears. By evening, Celeste's influencer partnerships began to crumble. One brand after another dropped her quietly but decisively. No grand apologies, no reckonings from them. Only angry, self-pitying Facebook statuses that backfired spectacularly under the sheer weight of public scrutiny. "People love to tear families apart," Darlene posted bitterly. "Not everything you hear is true." The comments underneath weren't kind. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from your own daughter." "The receipts don't lie, ma'am. You raised her just to use her. Shame on you." Each comment was a stitch in the wound they had left, sewing it shut from the outside in. Watching it unfold didn't bring me the gleeful satisfaction I once thought it might. Instead, it felt quiet, heavy. Right. I didn't dance in the ruins of what they destroyed. I simply walked away from the ashes. Daniel and I sat on the couch that night, the glow of my phone dim against the darkened living room. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "You should be proud." He just leaned over, kissed my temple, and whispered, "You're free now." And somehow, for the first time, I believed it. I blocked every number connected to them. I filed the paperwork to change my legal name, the name they had used to control, to shame, to siphon. I chose a new Wania name that carried no echoes of their cruelty. Standing at the courthouse weeks later, Daniel holding my hand, I signed the documents with a hand that didn't shake. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation, ownership, salvation. I wasn't erasing the past. I was refusing to let it define me. As I walked out into the crisp Texas air, papers clutched tightly in one hand, Daniel's fingers threaded through the other. I felt lighter, cleaner, whole. Maybe burning bridges wasn't destruction after all. Maybe sometimes it was the only way to save yourself from drowning. Sometimes burning bridges isn't destruction. It's salvation. The sun felt different that morning, not blinding or oppressive, just warm, gentle against my skin as I walked out of the courthouse for the second time, clutching a new set of papers close to my chest. My name, the one they'd weaponized against me for decades, was gone. In its place, a name I chose. A name no one could stain with their lies or betrayal. Daniel waited by the truck, a bouquet of sunflowers in his hands, grinning like we had just won something bigger than any court ruling. And maybe we had. We didn't rush home. We stopped for coffee at a sleepy diner off the highway, the kind with chipped mugs and old country songs playing too softly to recognize. I sipped my coffee slowly, breathing in the freedom like oxygen. The future wasn't mapped out yet. It didn't need to be. For the first time in my life, the future felt like something I could create, not something I had to survive. Weeks later, we moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a little patch of backyard struggling under the Texas heat, but it was ours. No hand-me-downs laced with guilt. No pictures of faces smiling through gritted teeth on the walls. Just space to heal, to rebuild, to breathe. We painted the living room a soft shade of green, the color of new beginnings. Adopted a mutt from the shelter, a shy little creature with scars we couldn't see but somehow understood. We named him Lucky. The nights were quieter out there. No sirens, no angry phone calls, no echoes of guilt trailing into the dark. Just crickets, the low hum of the ceiling fan, and Daniel's steady breathing beside me. Every now and then, the old wounds itched. A memory would sneak up on me, a Christmas morning spent trying to buy their approval, a birthday where the only gift was silence. But the memories didn't own me anymore. They were just there, like faded scars, proof I had healed, not proof I was broken. Of course, they tried half-heartedly. Celeste posted vague, passive-aggressive quotes about traitorous family members and fake victims on her Instagram stories. Margot shared old family photos from years ago with captions like, "Some people forget where they come from." I didn't answer, didn't comment, didn't rage, because their audience had shrunk. Their words, once daggers, now fell dull and ignored. Some distant cousins I barely knew sent awkward messages. "Hey, sorry things went down the way they did. Hope you're good." I read them, smiled a little at the irony, and hit delete. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was simply uninterested. The battle was over, and I had won not because I destroyed them, but because I refused to let them destroy me. Trust, of course, would take time. I joined a local support group for adults estranged from their families, not because I needed to vent, but because I wanted to build real connections, real community, real belonging. I listened to others tell their stories, some eerily similar, others heartbreakingly worse, and found comfort not in shared anger, but in shared survival. We laughed more than we cried. We talked about gardens and jobs and terrible dating stories. We celebrated each other's wins, no matter how small. Healing wasn't a grand explosion. It was quiet. It was in the mornings I woke up and didn't brace myself for disappointment. It was in the dinners where no one measured love in dollars or obedience. It was in the laughter that bubbled up unexpectedly when Daniel tried and failed to bake bread from scratch one Saturday. It was in the peace that came from knowing no one else had the power to define me anymore. On my first birthday after the name change, I checked my new P.O. box, curious. Inside was a card unsigned, ugly in its bitterness. Without opening it, I walked to the nearest trash can and dropped it inside. Some things didn't deserve even a second of your time. Instead, I went home, baked a simple vanilla cake, lopsided and imperfect. Daniel and I ate it on the back porch, barefoot, Lucky curled at our feet, the stars winking back at us like they were finally in on the joke. No fancy toasts, no grand speeches, no need for anything more. Just a quiet life built from scratch, strong, stubborn, and finally mine. And as the candles flickered out, I whispered a simple prayer to the dark. Thank you for the ending, and for the beginning. Because sometimes, Family isn't the blood that binds you. Sometimes, family is what you build, not what you survive. After everything I lived through, here's the truth no one tells you early enough. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, respect, safety. You don't owe your peace to people who weaponize your loyalty. You don't have to keep bleeding just because someone else hands you the knife with a smile. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And healing, real healing, sometimes means walking away without needing to slam the door. It means quietly rebuilding a life so full, so joyful, that their absence feels like freedom, not loss. If you're standing at that crossroads right now, wondering if it's okay to put yourself first, let me tell you, it is, and you deserve to. Because you were never too much. You were never the problem. You were simply trying to bloom in a garden that refused to water you. So bloom anyway. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought would never betray you? What was the hardest part? And what did you learn about yourself? Drop a comment below, even just a simple 1 inch if this story touched your heart. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far our little community is reaching. And hey, if you felt seen, if you found even a flicker of strength through this story, please hit that subscribe button and stay connected. We have so many more real, raw, and healing stories to share together. You are not alone here. Thank you for listening and for being part of something real.